Guys, just before we get started, if you're loving the podcast, can you please go leave us a 5-star review on Spotify, and please make sure that you subscribe on whatever channel that you listen to us on. It helps us out dramatically.
Put the work in, it will all be okay, is really what I would say. Like, there's so much, different variables that equate to quote unquote being successful or making it to wherever you're trying to go. And the one that you can control is the amount of effort that you put in. There's so many other things about if your competitors are more well-funded than you, they've got more money to spend on ads, their team is bigger. The one thing that you can control is your effort. You can control that and put in freaking level 10 on that. And whatever it is that you want, you'll ultimately end up getting there if you keep iterating.
Yeah, we're golden, baby girl, we're golden. They're about to see us shine, cause we're golden. They can't ever break us down, cause we're golden. They're about to see us glow, cause we're golden. Yeah, we're golden, baby girl, we're golden. They're about to see us shine, cause we're golden.
Sabri, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on.
I got to say, I haven't, I've followed your stuff for a very long time, being in business and obviously seeing the growth of King Kong, but also yourself and the knowledge levels. I don't know what it is, but there's also something really mysterious about you that I find that I really love, and maybe it might just be me, but I've been really excited about this one. I think the way you talk about marketing, there's not many that I've met and not many conversations that I think I've had that where I think you can kind of have chats on that level, if that makes sense. So I'm a business lover. I love podcasting. I love conversations about business. So really excited about this one.
Awesome. No problems. Thank you.
We might start. So I'd love for you to kind of take us back to the beginning of King Kong and tell us a little bit about the startup story and how it kind of come to fruition.
The sandy white beaches of 2016. No, I guess to kind of give you a little bit of a backstory of how I ended up in the position to start King Kong, because that's kind of a whole piece in itself. I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. I grew up in a regional beach town called Byron Bay, which is obviously now very famous with influencers and all that jazz. But it wasn't when I was growing up there. I was raised by a single parent mum. Me and my sister kind of raised by her. I watched her hold down 3 jobs and really just hustle her face off to kind of provide a good upbringing for me and my sister. And then I got it into my first real job, which was a sales job, selling ink cartridges over the phone when I was 16 years old. And that was definitely a cold, hard slap to the face, being on the front lines of capitalism, asking strangers for money, getting them telling me to fuck off and all the other stuff. And I really, really sucked at that, and then kind of figured out that game. The business owner there was kind enough to say, look, you suck really badly, but I'm going to give you another week. You've been here for 2 weeks and you really suck. But if for some miracle you can turn this around, I'll give you a shot. So I kind of just approached it completely different, became their number 1 salesperson there, literally overnight, and just outsold everybody for the time that I was there. Didn't want to go to university. I was very, very sure of that. And then when I was 17, I kind of packed my bags and headed off to London. And when I was there, I worked in every type of job that you can imagine. The worst jobs, and I did all kinds of sales, sold one-to-one, one-to-many, over the phone, door-to-door, you name it, I've done it. And at all of those places, I was the number 1 salesperson for however long that I was there. And kind of everyone told me, hey, you should get into marketing. I was still a young kid, 19 years old at the time, I think. You should get into marketing. You should get into marketing. I didn't even know what marketing was. And then I bought this academic book on marketing, and I read it, and I was like, this seems pretty just stale, boring crap. But all these other people that I looked up to were telling me to go get a marketing degree. So I moved back to Australia after going to the States and went and got a marketing degree. And it's not worth more than the piece of paper that it's printed on, to be kind. And I was working a part-time job. I was actually working full-time and studying full-time, and was working for a company selling Google AdWords, ended up selling SEO over the telephone, and then I went to the business owner and he was like, hey, we don't sell that. Like, we don't even know what that is. Like, you better figure it out. So I fell down the rabbit hole of like online marketing and SEO, and then figured out how to do SEO because I sold it already at $700 a month. And then after, like, I was like, hey, I can do this like better than what this business owner is doing. So I went and started my own thing over a summer break at uni, and by the end of it, you know, I had 30 clients, you know, I was doing a couple of $100,000 a month. And I was like, why would I go back to university and learn how to do this when I'm already doing it, right? So I dropped out of university, built that team up, and ended up selling that business to a co-founder. And then because I'm a stickler for finishing things, I went back and painfully completed like the last 2 units that I had. And then just kind of fucked around a little bit, to be honest. Like, I had a few e-commerce businesses, which I built, some that I ran into the ground, some that I sold. Just a bunch of different things. I did like a joint venture with like the AFL, and we launched like a group buying site. I raised some money for that. And yeah, at all of those different businesses, I was always tasked with like the problem of how do we get more customers, right? And I saw just, it doesn't matter what the business is. Like, the business that you're in is the customer acquisition business. If you don't have customers, then you don't have a business. And so that was just something like, I think since the age of really 16 years old and being on the front lines and getting my teeth kicked in and kind of sharpening my teeth and learning all of that stuff firsthand, and not learning it in business books, but actually doing it. And then like going around it the long way, like being the person on the front lines, like speaking to complete strangers and asking them for money, and then figuring out all the other things that are in place to make that all make sense. And that was just a challenge that they always gave me. It's like, hey, like, you go out and figure out how to sell this thing. And at all of those businesses, that was my task. At a few of those things, like, there would be like, you know, a team member that I would hire, or, you know, an employee, or we would go to hire an agency. And I realized very quickly that no one really knew how to do any of this stuff, right? And they were all very quick to say like, hey, like, we'll manage your Facebook page and we'll put out content and we'll do this and we'll create you this. And no one would ever speak in terms of customer acquisition cost, like return on investment, what's the payback period, like what does this thing back out, how does it look? And no one like wanted to have that conversation. They all just wanted to talk about views and pre-rolls and all the fluffy stuff that I couldn't like pay my employees with. And that was when I just saw like, hey, there's a huge opportunity. Like, no matter what business that you walk into, this is a consistent theme. This is a consistent problem to solve for people. And me being like, you know, seeing what the lack of money can do in a household, being, you know, brought up in that way, and thinking about that, and then thinking, where could I have the most impact? And it wasn't just solving that one problem for me in one business that I operate in. It was helping lots of people to solve this huge fundamental problem that they have, which is, how do I get more customers? Because I believe that like business is a huge vehicle to drive change, right? And if I can help someone around the world drive that change by giving them the information and kind of sending that end elevator back down to them, then that's something that excites me and I think is, you know, a worthy cause. And that was when I kind of like made the decision of like, hey, like, that's the business that I'm going to be in. Like, I'm going to be in the business of helping other people solve this big problem. You know, when I was running those other businesses and e-commerce businesses and whatnot, it's like I figure it out, and then I figure out like how to get the CAC lower than the LTV and all of that stuff. And then I just get bored, right? Like, it's not about the money game. Like, even if I can scale that to lots of, I don't get any fulfillment from that. It's just digits in the bank account. Like, when like money solves, you know, all the problems that money can solve. And then after that, then what?
Yeah, and I was speaking to someone the other day, and it was a conversation around, you know, this guy was really struggling around the understanding, or like he had this kind of perception. He's like, I'm like, what do you want? And he's like, money and power, right? And I was like, okay, but the idea being that he was so focused on the money and power that he was forgetting to play the game well. You know what I mean? And really, you got to kind of flip that on its head. And I think that's what you're saying is, you know, for you, it's you really enjoy that process of figuring it out and problem solving. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, because you talked about this journey that you went on where you really enjoyed, or you were the number one salesperson and you seemed to really enjoy that kind of process. But you also talked about this journey you were going on when you went to university and so on. And so there's always principles that you can follow, right? But were you someone that the whole way through that you always placed emphasis on figuring out your own way and building your own model? Or was there a model that you looked at and then you just applied that across? Because it's a really interesting, I feel like everybody has their own philosophies on business. There are kind of standard practice and principles, but then different people and I'm lucky that I get to speak to really amazing minds on a regular basis. But were you someone that pride yourself on creating your own philosophies and your own models, and then once you did that, you started applying that to everything you did? Or did you is there standard practice that you just got really good at honing in on?
Yeah, I would love to say that, I had these big grand plans and I thought about it so philosophically like that, but I didn't. And for me, I hadn't even read a sales book. I hadn't read any books on marketing or any of this stuff, right? I was a 16-year-old kid, just in the trenches, getting my teeth kicked in. So and even going past that, I still YouTube wasn't there. There was none of those things. There wasn't courses or anything. I literally, I've tallied it up and I've made over 1 million cold calls in my life, right? And that first hand of speaking to so many people on an auto dialer, making 600 dials a day, that teaches you things that you can't learn in marketing books, right? They're all people that are talking as an armchair expert about these are the laws of sales and da-da-da-da-da. It's have you made 1 million phone calls to people in 38 different countries? And you learn so much about human psychology. You learn when you're talking to people from all different races, backgrounds, socio-economic makeup, all of that stuff. You just see an insight. So for me, I went the long way around. I started on the front lines, being in the trenches, and doing that firsthand. And then only after doing that really for 6 or 7 years, then did I start kind of reading and looking at other things and other formats of how other people are doing it. But even when I did that, when I first started reading books or doing a course, and then I would do the things that they were talking about doing, and I wouldn't get the results, right? And I would be how come this isn't working? How come I'm not getting more money soldiers coming back to camp after I send a few out, right? And then it was a point of frustration and desperation. I was forget all of this crap. You have been on the front lines. You know what's involved. So why don't you just do what you do when you're on a telephone call, but just do it in an ad? And then it was when I started doing that things just exploded. When I took my salesmanship from making 150 cold calls a day to then writing ads that would call on 150,000 people in a day, then I fell down the whole direct response rabbit hole and basically making me and then canning and cloning me and multiplying me out, so then I could just take that sales message and I could reach way more people, because there's only so many hours in a day that I could make calls.
Do you think that's a characteristic that's a problem that can hold a lot of people back often, is focusing too much on the books and so on, and not spending enough time in the trenches and actually trying to learn and more being self-aware in the experiences they're having every day or the experiences they're having in business? Because I know that it definitely got me at one point, where you can overlearn and you're not paying attention over here, but instead, like you mentioned, you're trying to apply all these different, frameworks and principles, and they're not working for you and so on.
Yeah, I definitely think that. And I definitely think in an age where there is an abundance of information, there's a starvation for attention. And looking at where people sit with, people just mindlessly read books or do courses and listen to podcasts when they don't have a specific problem that they're looking to solve. And if you look at the retention of information, Like, if you're not writing it down, taking notes, and then revisiting that, like, it's gone, right? It's empty calories. So you really need to look at, like, what is the problem in my business that I'm looking to solve, and then seek the answers out to solve that and learn it through like the whole photosynthesis process of getting that information and then distilling that information down into actual practical knowledge from being out there in the marketplace and doing it. And people get like a shot of dopamine when they hear about some shiny tactic in a YouTube video, and then they feel like they're being successful just by hearing that, when really it's the application to use that to solve a problem that ultimately will get you to the outcome that you want. And I just think that people, need to be a lot more conscious about the information that they put in there. I call them mind viruses. I've certainly had a few in my lifetime. And it's like you need to almost like, take antibiotics to get rid of them, right? Even though they don't get rid of viruses, but it's the whole thing. It's like if you get one wrong seed or virus planted in your mind from somebody that hasn't actually, it can derail you for years of your life. And so I like to really audit the people that I get information from, and not people that have had like, a good run for 2 or 3 years and it is the next hot sensation on TikTok. I like to look at people that have lived a good life and that have had long enduring success in whatever it is that I'm going to them for, right? Like if you're looking to get in good shape, it's easy to like look at some shredded dude on Instagram who's like dehydrated on PEDs and he's like done this crazy cut. It's like, is that who you really want to be looking at and mimicking? Or like, do you want to look at someone that's like a longevity expert and is there to like have like enduring good health and good looks for a long extended period of time?
Yeah, it's so true. And I like the idea of the aggressive learning, like, learning because there's a problem. I can look back at times in my life and it's like, that's where I've learnt the most. And especially because you're applying it in real time, you kind of get that constant feedback loop, which is, amazing as well. But 100%, everything you're saying right there is the truth. We'll get back onto King Kong now and kind of get back to this, how that got started and back into that story.
Sure. So then basically that led me to the position where I started King Kong. And then, I believe that if you start a business, you're going to either use like sweat equity or you're going to use financial equity. And I wasn't in a position where I had financial equity, so I used sweat equity. I made 150 cold calls a day from my bedroom, went back to my roots basically, and started getting on the phone and started calling people up, had my first client in 3 days, and then just like was working out of my bedroom on a computer that my girlfriend, who was at a corporate job at the time, so kindly bought me, who is now my wife, mother of my children, and basically just lived like a squirrel, herding nuts and saving all of the money up until I got into a position where I had a surplus of cash to then start actually doing the stuff that I was telling my clients to do, and then started running ads and started to scale up. It was just a one-man army. Then, I had a few contractors and then made the decision of like the business was doing really well, really healthy cash flow. It was just spitting off cash, and said, hey, like I lost a deal to this guy who wanted to come into my office and shake my hand for like a 30 grand website. And he just couldn't get his head around why I wouldn't allow him to come in the office. And I was in my Ugg boots at the time. And it wasn't that I lied. I didn't say that I had an office. I just didn't say that I had an office, right? So it was just like I was picking up the phone, like multiple accents, pretending like there was lots of people at the company. You do what you got to do when you get started, and got my clients incredible results. They had me just thinking about their campaigns like 18 hours a day. I would sell in the day and then I would like do all the work by night. So I was working 18-hour days at the time, and I did that for about a year. And then I was like, this is unsustainable. Like, you lost this deal. Like, you need to pony up, get an office. Like, what are you doing here? Are you just going to be like cash flow dude in your pajamas, or are you going to actually build a business? And it was the latter. I wanted to build a business and have more impact. So I got my first office and then started to build a team, and, pushed, shoved, scratched, and hustled my face off to get that to a team of 10 people. And then we've just been scaling up kind of since then.
The stories that you can tell of starting a business. I remember my consulting business, same thing. I had a mattress that was on the floor, and it almost became the space, like I'm sure you had the same thing. There's like a space you would go to make those sales.
Yeah.
I can kind of think back to the
dungeon.
same thing. Yeah. Like literally sit in my bedroom, makes call. I lived in a housemate too. So like I'd just be making calls all day, all night. And like he'd just be sitting in the lounge room. He's like, "What the fuck's wrong with this guy?" But it's like it was a koala mattress on the floor. It was like I think I would have got one of the first.
I probably sold that to you.
One of the first
They were a
koala
client of
mattresses.
ours.
Like one of the first koala mattresses ever.
Yeah.
Classic. But those stories, like you look back and they're golden. So King Kong was obviously a really fast growing startup. I'd love to kind of go into those early days. Let's talk maybe one of those, 1 to 10, employees. What were some of the things that you did or you look back on and you kind of can say, yeah, that really helped us grow at such a fast rate? If you were, if there was maybe 2 or 3 strategies or kind of guiding principles.
I would say that just really leave all the money in the business and don't even live like a poor person. Seriously, like the amount of money that my wife and I lived on was ridiculous. Even the lowest paid team member in my company right now would be making 4 times what I was pulling out of the business. I really, really lived conservatively so that I had enough cash reserves to be able to hire people and not be freaking stressed out of my mind of how am I going to pay this person? So I think that the quicker that you can get to a place where you have a 6-month runway in terms of cash reserves, where if you hire somebody, you're not stressed out, that's a big thing, right? Because ultimately, the more successful people in life, the big difference between them is that they just have longer time horizons. So when you're starting out, you're hey, I want to freaking go take over the world in a year, right? And that's just not the right mindset to have. It's what you need to get started. But in the beginning, you want to be thinking of not how do I pull the money out now and live now because I've started a business and I need to look a certain way or I need to prove my friends wrong or whatever it might be, is no. Let me have a longer time horizon. Let me not spend any money. Let me live incredibly frugally and then use that money to build the business and reinvest and get people. And it's just people see when you've been successful and it's with salespeople, people see how much salespeople make and then they're not willing to do the things that salespeople do. Right. And it's the same thing in business. It's you have to endure so much pain and uncertainty to be able to live a certain way when you get past that, if you're fortunate enough to cross that chasm. Right. So in the beginning, I would definitely say you want to get yourself, the first point would be get yourself to a point as quick as possible that you can spend 80% of your time on sales. That's just the thing that's going to get you to $1 million. From 0 to $1 million, it's all about sales. And you need to basically try to engineer a place where, the hunting is done by day and the farming is done by night. So don't tell me that you have to work on the clients and all the stuff. So it's what do you think 5:30 to 1 o'clock in the morning is for? That's when that's for. You can only hunt in a certain amount of hours in the day, right? And you can farm whenever you want, right? People don't need to be awake. So you can do all that work at night. So you need to quickly get yourself, and I'm not recommending that you work 18 hours a day, but heck, that's what it takes, right? If you don't have money, then you better be willing to put that sweat equity in and just freaking grind it out, eating mee goreng. So that was the thing for me. It was just I knew that I was never going to have a business if I didn't have customers and I didn't have money to get customers. So I had to use time to get customers. And the time that I could spend to get customers just so happened to be from 8 a.m. in the morning till 6:30 at night. And that was my window. So I just made use of that window as much as I could, did all the work in the evening. You might be in a different position if you're listening to this. Maybe you've got a bit of cash reserves. Maybe you've got a cousin that's coming in and helping you do the work, right? Whatever that looks like, just get to a place where you're spending 80% of the time on bringing in the business. Then the next thing is cash reserves. Get them thick, get them healthy. So when you hire people, you're not worried about, oh my God, like I've got to do this to pay them, right? Because that's a very short time horizon. And if you're stressed out about money, you can't think about 6 months, 12 months, and what needs to happen to get yourself into a place that you're not stressed about money, because all you're thinking about is money. And then the third thing is really just sitting down with somebody who's going to do your finances. That might be yourself. If you got Xero, if you got bank statements, whatever it is, and just getting some understanding of what an average client is worth to you. When you ask someone this, they say it varies. Of course it varies, right? Unless you're selling like freaking water bottles where everything's the same, it is going to vary. But find out on average how much a customer is worth to your business, and then find out how much inputs that it takes in either time or money to get one of those customers, right? If you don't have financial capital to deploy and you're deploying your actual time as the resource, you want to find out exactly how many phone calls does it make for you to get a proposal out? How many proposals do you need to get out in order to get a customer? How many hours does that take you to do? And then how many, if you've got 21 working days in a month and you're dialing for 8.5 hours a day, you can basically create a scientific customer acquisition model where you know exactly what the inputs are going to need to be in order to get to the outcome that you're striving for. You might want 5 clients a month, it might be 7. Don't just wonder how you're going to get there. Come up with a model so you know the inputs. So you know that like when you wake up and you're getting your teeth kicked in, if you're cold emailing or DMing people or messaging people in Facebook groups or cold calling them, whatever it is, you know like what it's for. You know what the end looks like, and you know exactly how many reps that you need to get in order to get that outcome, rather than just sitting there hoping and praying that a customer falls in your lap.
And that's where your principle, I forgot what you called it, farming and...
Hunting and farming.
Hunting and farming. So that's where your principle of hunting and farming comes from, because scientifically, if you know how many calls you have to make to get a customer, and you know how much that customer's worth, you can spend 8 hours a day getting those customers, and that's going to help you grow quicker. And if you just put the hard yards in for, a year or whatever it takes, farming it at night, then you can, that's probably the quickest way to $1 million.
I think so.
Yeah, very interesting. And I think, again, I think that, and so there's obviously that kind of mindset is a testament to your sales background as well, right? Like that's the sales in you, that scientific method of cold calls. For every 10 cold calls we make, we get a proposal. For every, 5 proposals we send off, we get 1 client, and so on. And so one thing, I guess a question that I would have for you around that first million then, and, that first 10 employees. You talked about, having a great accountant or someone that you can go to start building out some of these financial models. When it comes to hiring and say the principles of cash flow and especially in a service-based business or an agency and trying to make those first 10 hires, is there any guiding advice around pricing or gross margins and so on to be able to make those hires? Because I feel like that's something that you can stop a lot of people,
Yep.
like not pricing effectively compared to what you said. Even you mentioned inputs around getting a client, but also the farming side of it as well is
Yep.
obviously a big one. So the inputs that go into that, as you start to not do all the work and you start handing some of that work to other people.
Yep.
Is there any kind of advice you can offer around that?
Definitely. I think that if you look at how most businesses are started, they're started by the practitioner. They're started by the person that is passionate about starting that business, right? And so you're talking about the cook who loves to cook, right? Who starts a catering business, right? Or the carpenter who starts a joinery business because he loves making stuff with his hands. The real estate agent who loves to sell homes, so he starts to, and that's how everything starts. And these people, they start as a practitioner, and nowhere did they really get the foundational level education that is required in order to build a business. And there is there's a huge distinction between a business owner and a business builder, right? A business owner is someone that just creates a job for themselves. And you go back 10 years, 15 years later, they're lucky to still be in business, and Like their hair's gone 50 shades of grey. They're stressed out of their mind. They've never been able to hire somebody to help them in the business because they're constantly in this negative feedback loop of telling themselves, good people don't exist. I can't get good people. And then they just create like this job, and it just becomes this big time vampire that sucks the life out of them. They don't get annual leave. They can't go on holidays whenever they want, and they're constantly stressed out, right? That's not a good fate for anybody, because people start businesses to get freedom, right? Yet that's not where most people end up.
It's just a job with more pressure, right?
Correct. And so then you see another person who falls into like the business builder bucket, and you come back in 10, 15 years and they've got a full team, or they've sold the businesses and cashed out, you know, as a multi-millionaire. And like, they're both in the same business. They're both selling the same thing. So like, what makes the difference in those two individuals, right? It's not the market. It's none of those things, right? It's just the skills of that individual. That's all it is, right? They've got the same 24 hours a day to work on it, right? And they're both self-made, but only one will probably admit that. The other one will always have some lack of resources, and my competitors were pulling their pants down on price, and this employee double-crossed me, and all of these stories that they tell themselves that aren't empowering stories. So I say all that to kind of give you the long scenic tour to the answer around pricing, because they start as the practitioner and they always base their pricing off a multiple of their time. Oh, like when I was working here, I was getting paid $30 an hour. So if I can charge $80, I'll be laughing, right? And they have like that old limiting belief where it's just like they're marking up their time. And like, you'll never get wealthy doing that, right? Because you want to sell value. You don't want to sell time. So the biggest thing that you want to do in order to give yourself an unfair like competitive advantage in business is you want to command premium prices. You just do. Because if I can afford to spend more, like if I make more off a customer than you do, then I can spend more to get that customer. And if I can spend more, then I just go and suck all the oxygen out of the room. And I buy up all the attention and all the eyeballs. And then I am the 800-pound gorilla, right? And so if you set yourself up where you're just charging a multiple of time, then you're not going to be a premium pricing because you're not solving a big enough problem, right? So it's, you think about the engineer, right? Who, and this is the thing that holds a lot of people back, is that they feel guilty to charge a lot of money, right? That's the wrong lens to look at it through, right? You need to be thinking about is, one, how valuable is this problem to solve for this person? Right? And if it's not valuable, then you need to look for a different problem to solve, right? You need to find, because, you know, you get compensated by the complexity of the problems that you solve for people out there in the marketplace. So you want to be solving complex problems so you can command premium prices, so you give yourself an unfair advantage. And you want to, as quickly as possible, move to a value-based equation, where you're basically charging 10% of the value that you create, right? It might be that like you're a personal trainer for like high paid executives. These guys are earning 300 grand a year. Like, what is it worth to them to get in shape? To be able to go home and not be a zombie on the couch watching Netflix when they've got, you know, 3 kids under the age of 10 and they need to have energy and they can't make love to their wife and blah, 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 right? What's that guy willing to pay? It's definitely more than $100 an hour, right? Because it's a value-based problem. And if you were to come to that individual and say, cool, let me get this right. These are all the things that you're suffering from right now. You feel 30 years older than you are right now. You look at yourself in the mirror and you aren't proud what you see. You're not chasing your wife around the bedroom anymore. You can't get up and take your kids to the park when you get home because you just zapped and you've got no energy. You eat like shit. You look like shit, right? Let's just be honest. Like, how big of a problem is that for you to solve? Like, I can solve all of that for you in the next 6 months for 20 grand. Like, do you think that they're going to be in a position to pay that? Yet there's people that are personal trainers at gyms for $60 an hour and they don't have enough clients, right? So it's the same thing when an engineer, like someone's production line, right, is broken. and like they're losing 250 grand an hour every hour that this thing is down. And they've had all these engineers in there coming out there charging $180 an hour, coming and trying to figure, oh, no, I can't fix it. And like they've lost like $1 million, right, since the factory's been down, or it might be $2-3 million. And an engineer comes in and within 12 minutes, he solves the problem and he charges you $100,000 to solve that problem. You're not paying for that engineer's 12 minutes. You're paying for the 15 years that he has had to work to figure out how to solve that problem in 12 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the thing that people they just get so hell-bent and hold themselves back on the pricing, is they're just not willing to look for those problems and then charge what it is that they should be charging.
Guys, if you're loving this episode, make sure to take a screenshot, give us a tag, or even take a photo if you're watching it. Give us a tag, help spread the love. It helps us out dramatically. Guys, I want to say a massive thank you to our major sponsors, BizCover. I was driving home the other night and I thought to myself, wow, we have so much stuff in the studio that is extremely valuable, and if anything ever happened to it, I would never be able to forgive myself. So I needed contents insurance. By the time I got home, within 20 minutes, I was insured. There was no paperwork, and it was literally one of the easiest processes I've ever gone through. And that's the beauty of BizCover. They'll give you the best price. There's no paperwork involved, and it's truly so easy. So whether it's public liability, professional indemnity, or even like me, contents insurance, BizCover's you go to when it comes to getting your company insured and making sure that nothing ever comes to get you in the future. So if you want to get your company insured and check them out, the link to their website is in the show notes. I've been a customer now for 7 years, and it's for good reason. Check them out. Is it a positioning of the problem thing, or is it an actual people not recognizing or being able to identify those bigger problems?
It's a combination of both, and a third one in being able to articulate it, right? It's like you need to first figure out, like, you know, what is the problem, right? The very first thing that that's what you should be identifying when you speak to anybody, right? Like, oh, you want to build a new home? Find out, like, people just don't go out and just build homes, right? There is some other thing. There's something that they want to do, right? They're sick of renting. They hate the place that they live in. The neighbors are noisy, like whatever it might be. Like find out like what is that problem that they're trying to solve. It's very easy to get caught up in, oh, like you want a single level home, like, you know, 400 square meters, like 4 bedrooms. You want this, you want that, double locker garage, rather than actually thinking and doing a proper needs analysis and a diagnosis, as I call it, and find out exactly like what it is that this person wants. What is this problem that they're trying to solve before you start writing that prescription? Because that's what everybody does. They just try to sell their thing, their little widget, their thing, their time, their consulting, their service, whatever that they've got to sell. They just try to ram that thing down people's throats without actually fundamentally understanding, like, what is it that you're experiencing? What other things have you tried to solve this problem? How long have you been thinking about solving this problem? What's it worth for you to solve this problem? When are you looking to solve the problem? When would you have liked to solve this problem and have it over and done with? What are all the other things that you don't have time for in your life because you're spending all your time and energy trying to figure out how to solve this problem that you need to pay attention to? Mm-hmm. Like, tell me a little bit more about that. And then from that is then being able to articulate clearly what that is costing them.
And the articulation is what creates the premium, right? Like,
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't just like not understand the problem better than the prospect and think that you can command a better premium than the marketplace. That's not how efficient marketplaces work, right? It's like you need to intimately be able to understand that problem better than anybody else in that market and be able to articulate it more precisely than anybody else. Because if you're able to do that, that means by definition that you understand it better than anybody else. And if you understand it, then you should be able to solve it better than anybody else. And if you can solve it better than anybody else, you can charge more people more money because they want it solved quicker, more painlessly, all of those things.
And that's basically the two sides of the product or the service. If you can articulate it better than anyone, solve it better than anyone, you get paid more than anyone.
Correct.
Interesting. I love that. All right, so let's move forward now to, I guess, some of the biggest lessons around beyond that first million or that first 10 employees and what it really takes to go beyond that. You know, you've been able to build King Kong into quite the juggernaut and you know, it's a highly valued business now. What are the lessons that you can share from, say, getting King Kong from 10 employees to where it is today?
Yeah, it's not the sexy answer that everybody wants, but it really is around team. And like I fundamentally believe, like, you know, I over-index into like communication and sales and marketing and all of those kind of things because I believe that everything is a sale. Like when I asked like my girlfriend out, she like I met her at work, and I met her and her friend, and she was like, I don't know how the topic came up, but she told me that she wasn't single, right? And her other friend was like, oh, I'm single and I'm ready to mingle, right? And I was like, that's the first objection. Like, you've got a partner. And so like I ended up getting her number, and then obviously finding out that she didn't have a partner. It was just a front that she gave up. So that was like the biggest sale that I've ever had to make in my life. But then after that, it's like, yeah, you sell to get new customers, and then after that, you sell on your first few team members to join your team, because, you know, it's just you in a bedroom, or you in a small office with no vibe, nothing going on, and you're like, hey, this thing's going to be big, I promise you. And you need to be very good at communicating that vision and selling that to them. And then you need to be really good at backing all of that up. You know, my first 2 hires are still with me today, and they always like rag on me and joke on me. They're like, you know, you told me that this thing was going to be like really big, and like I was like, how full of shit is this dude? I believe him, and like now they're both running teams, right, in my company, and they've got lots of people reporting to them. So like, if I didn't have the ability to clearly articulate that to the point where they believed that, then I wouldn't have got them, and then I would have just kept on doing what I was doing, right? And I wouldn't have a business. And then, so in that first 0 to 1 million, yeah, it's all about sales and marketing, bringing people on, and then, you know, you cap out on time, right? Like, even if you're calling 8 hours a day, there's only so many hours in the day that you can call, right? And then if you factor in like churn and bringing on new customers and just how businesses work and service businesses work, then you cap out again, because you get to a place where, you know, the new clients that you're bringing on, it comes to a point where you build the business up where you've got, you know, hundreds of clients, but you're churning out as many as you're bringing on, right? And so then you hit that equilibrium again, and you have to basically keep on breaking through these plateaus. And you can't do that as a one-man person. Sure, you can't even do it with a small team, right? So then it's about, how do you attract those people? How do you build a company and a culture where people want to come work with? And I know a lot of people say all of this, and it's not the sexiest stuff, but it's the truth, right? And when I come on and I do these podcasts, all I'm trying to do is be the merchant of truth. I don't have any other hidden agenda. Like, you know, I do it to try and send that elevator back down to other people. So I know it's not the sexiest thing, but it's the truth. It's what needs to happen. And, you know, if you focus on your ability to communicate with everything that you do, like salesmanship, you know, is just like persuasion, you know, when you're basically taking it to a whole nother level. And then you need to write job ads that sell people. You need to sell people on what the goals are for the company, what the vision is, where we're going, and get them bought in. And then as they bring more people in, then they need to be a beacon of like, you need to have so much conviction that you can sell to those people, and it trickles down to other people within your organization, and everybody can feel and see that, and it becomes real, because, you know, you don't win championships by yourself, right? Like it's easy for me to come onto podcasts or to do YouTube videos and pretend that like King Kong is all that it is because of me, but it's not. And that wouldn't be fair. Like, it's because I've got an incredible team behind me that run the business and are incredibly skilled and loyal and hardworking individuals. And that's the reason why King Kong is where it is. There's no way that you can build a business the size that we have, where we've got 200,000 customers in 136 different countries around the world, as a one-man person. It just doesn't happen.
What growth have you seen through that then? So obviously building a team and going from, say, the technician, the real hands-on in the early days, to then building a team, you know, what growth have you had to go throughout that process? Because I could imagine that, you know, that would be, you know, there would be a mirror shining back on you at nearly all times, you know, as you're going through that process, and you're forced to do that, because if you want to have a great team, you've got to be a great leader. Yeah,
100%. And something that, like, I say to my team a lot is that, like, yeah, you're in this position, but you need to re-qualify for this job every year. Because like the business is getting to a new level every year. And if you're not outgrowing with skills the business, then you're going to fall behind and you're not going to be the right person for this role. And the same thing goes for me, right? Like it's like I need to become the person that is worthy enough to attract that leadership team that is going to then take the business to that next level, because it's not me taking the business to that next level by myself. So what type of person do I need to become that is worthy to have people that want to come and be on that mission with me? And is it exciting enough that I can get, A players that want to come in and, be on that journey with me? So it's always about like, it's a never ending journey. You can never become complacent. If like the problems that you solve, they don't get easier, they only get harder and bigger and hairier. And if you're not increasing your skill levels, like you are going to be the constraint in the business. Like the vision of the founder is the constraint for most businesses. And they'll love to tell you all types of other things, but it's not the truth. And I tell my team that all the time, is that like, I don't take it lightly, the trust that you've placed it on me to lead you, right? And to be in that position. And like I work on myself like a lot to try and break through those next plateaus, because it's always like a limitation in your think. Like your think just isn't big enough. You're not thinking about bigger problems to solve. You're not having the courage to go after those because you have lost the fire in your belly, or you did this for money, and now that you have money, you don't have drive, right? And then the kind of business just falls apart, because like a business without a driver is a terrible, terrible thing, right? And so like that's the thing that you need to constantly be spending a disproportionate amount of your time on, is thinking and not reading and consuming. And like everyone's just like so caught up in just constant inputs and reading and shit that they just never sit there and think. And just like think about what it is that they want to achieve, where it is that they want to go, what does it look like? And then trying to formulate a plan of what it would take to get there, and what are the skills would you need to possess in order to solve the problems that would get you there, and then go and consume to get you to that next level. But no way near. It's like, people used to spend time thinking in the shower or on the toilet. And now it's like they've even got their smartphone with them, when they're in the toilet. So it's less like, when do you ever give your brain that time to just decompress and let some of those kind of thoughts come and marinate in your mind and come up with the answers and the solutions that it is that you need? It's like every waking moment you've got your phone in your hand, and then, you've got some Bluetooth speaker in the shower, and you're listening to a podcast, and then you're on your phone on the toilet, and then you're listening to music on the way to work. Or like, it's like when are you going to get in contact with who you are? Because that's what you need to do in order like to build a better business. Like you need to become a better individual in order to break through those plateaus, because all of the business problems are really personal problems that are a reflection of the founder that have materialized in their business.
I reckon that's one of the best answers I've ever heard to that kind of question, because they all resonate with me, and I'm sure everyone who's listening can resonate with that as well. But I think you're playing two games at the same time, and I really love what you talked about around solving the problem and giving yourself some time to really think. I don't know if you've read you've read anything from Keith Cunningham or followed any, but he says, thinking time. It's like the golden thing that you should put in your week, or even, your day, every day, where you lock yourself in a room, get a notepad and your phone, nothing is in that room. And it's just that you spend 1 to 2 hours in that room. And, ever since I started doing that personally, it's amazing how complex problems can become, or you can create simplified solutions for those complex problems, because you don't have all this clutter, and you don't have all these distractions. And it's funny how a distracted mind can, almost create a complex solution to a problem. But then the other side of it being, that personal growth and that ability to create a vision into the future for both yourself and your business and start pulling yourself to that time. More often than not. And it's funny, you that's kind of those ceilings that you were talking about, where you're constantly breaking through, like the ability for you to think beyond that ceiling. And you always go through, it's like the hero's journey. You always kind of go through that really tough period before that ceiling, and usually it takes that vision to re-spark and pull you through. So I really love that. I think, that was amazing.
And I for instance, if you just think about and you look at the most quote unquote successful people and what is it that they do, right? And it's like what does Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger do? They just sit around reading all day, right? Or Bill Gates, he's famous for going into his log cabin and reading and then having some time alone, right? And I've even noticed it if you run a business, all you need to do is even just go down to the Mornington Peninsula or go an hour away, and as soon as you get that geographic distance from your business, it's
yeah.
and everything kind of settles down, and you get a clarity of your mind, and you silence the chatter just from geography and proximity to things. And then, even going overseas is another thing, right? It's another great thing for you to go away and expand the way that you think and being put in different places. And they're the things that you need to create your time for, and you need to have it routined. Everyone is always militant if they're smart about their time while they're at work. And then their life after work is just nothing is structured. They don't book in any time hey, this is when you're going to sauna, or this is when you're going to go for a nature walk, or this is when you're going to hang out and just chill with your wife, or do whatever you want to do. And none of that stuff's penciled in, so life just gets in the way.
Yeah. I went on a 7-day silent retreat once, and it was still the most profound experience in my life, both for business, vision for that, but also personally. And it was because day 1 through to 3, I was kind of getting through that period of getting the clutter out. Day 4, I had more clarity than I've ever had in my life on everything, and it was crazy. And then, still to this day, I get this a Saturday, just a Saturday from 8 a.m. till 12 p.m. I solve more problems in that time than I do during the week, and I think it's a testament to that principle that you just talked about as well. So yeah, and I think that's the hardest thing to do in when we talk about those early days, the startup, that 0 to 1 million, that 0 to 10 employees.
Yeah, you're not doing it there.
No,
That's just you're running through the jungle with a tomahawk in your hand, and all you're trying to do is bloody survive when the tigers are running after you.
Yeah, literally. No, but that's sound advice. All right, so now I want to kind of dive into your mind and marketing. How do you think about it? Because I think, that's, when I said at the start, there's this mysterious nature about it. Everything, I think all your principles are out there for people to learn and so on. But that's why I was most excited, because I think you've got a different way of looking at it, and I'd love for it to kind of give everyone an understanding of that and have a conversation about it.
It's a very broad question.
It is a broad question.
So the way that I think about it is, I think about attention first, right? Because regardless of what business that you're in, it's all about attention. That's what everything comes to. So, we used to live in a day and age where everything for attention was siloed, right? You would just for instance, if you were on television, you were watching television, right? And you were competing with all the other advertisers on television, or same on radio, right? Or it's if you were playing a video game, you were playing video games. If you were going to meet women, you were out at a bar going to meet women, right? Now, everything has converged to the smartphone, right? And it's created this huge Hunger Games and attention arena where everyone, regardless of whether you're a local plumber or, you know, you're Kim Kardashian, you know, trying to sell clothing, you're all competing for that same currency on that news feed, right? And attention, you know, that is the currency. That is what every business is in. So I don't think about it as in, let me just market this little gadget gizmo service that I've got. I think about like, what is the hook, right? Like my prospect, it's like they are in a car with like 6 of their friends, all the windows are down, the music is blaring, right? There's so much chaos that's going on. There is a blizzard, and how do I get their attention? Like that is my prospect, right? Whether they're doing a commute, they're on their phone, they're scrolling through Instagram, there's half-naked supermodels, Dan Bilzerian's feeding bears, you've got Joe Rogan smoking weed with Elon, there's all this political warfare and all this stuff that's going on, and it's just absolute chaos, right? There's just so much endless distractions and noise and notifications that are coming in, and that's like an abundance and a wealth of inputs into the human brain, right? And like any efficient market, right? If you have like an oversupply of one thing, you have an undersupply of the other thing. And the undersupply is of attention. And that's like what you're really battling it out to get. Because unless you get that attention, nothing else matters, right? So the first thing is like, if I need to sell something, the only way that I can sell something is by getting somebody's attention first. And people are going to either pay with time or they're going to pay with money. So even if, you know, you're putting out any piece of content to get somebody to become a customer, you're asking them to already pay with their time and to give you their attention. So in a world where there are infinite and endless options, and you've got, you know, Bumble and Hinge and Tinder, and you've got Netflix on your phone, and you've got all the games and, you know, the iTunes store and the App Store and blah, 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 just Instagram, TikTok, all of that endless entertainment, right? That's what I'm competing with. Then what I'm putting out needs to be as entertaining in order to be able to be in that attention arena and not get beaten to a bloody pulp. Right? It needs to be engaging. I need to grab people in the busy world that they are in. And then once I have got that attention, right? Everyone just talks about get attention, get attention, get attention. That's just one side of the equation. Then if you're creative enough and you've been able to put things out there that are going to get attention, now we're in the hard place. Now we need to convert that attention into money, right? Leads, sales, whatever you want, right? We need to process the raw materials of attention, and we need to process it to give us the outputs we want. ROAS, ROI, leads, whatever that looks like. And that's the whole process of understanding persuasion and salesmanship and how do people buy and what makes them buy, and all of the unpacking all the psychology around getting people to buy. And people think, okay, like, you know, you run a digital marketing agency, you must be like the most technical person ever, right? And while I am technical, right, I have never like focused a huge amount of my time on unpacking that. On the technology, it's about unpacking the psychology, because people are so obsessed with like the new changes to TikTok's algorithm and Instagram's thing that gives me like, you know, an arbitrage of attention, or this new Facebook targeting hack that gives you a higher ROAS and gives you a better placement in the newsfeed and all of this stuff. And the half-life of those skills are very, very short. And like what works on Instagram and TikTok now is not going to work in a year. It's going to change. I can tell you right now from observing these things for long periods of time. So all the time and energy that you invest in acquiring the skills to game the algorithm or the ad platform or whatever it is that you're doing right now, the half-life is 6 to 12 months. So you've invested all this time and energy in becoming a master of that, and that will pay you no dividends ever again beyond that 12-month period. So in a world where everything's changing so quickly and there's all these new platforms and all this new targeting and all of those things, change is the constant, right? In the equation, that is the variable that is going to keep happening. So I like to focus and look at things like inversely through the lens of like what isn't going to change in marketing in the next 30 years. And the constant variable that isn't going to be the change variable is that it's going to be human beings and the human condition, right? And that thing hasn't changed in thousands of years, right? Like the way people like to think like, oh, everything's so, oh, what about AI and what about this and what about that? Like, yeah, they're all utilities. They're all delivery vehicles to a human being that's on the other end of the sign that is a chimpanzee in disguise, right? And like still has like the brain that hasn't evolved, right? And it still has like the overdeveloped prefrontal cortex and all of these different things, the human chemical makeup of that brain and how we respond to things. We'd like to think that we're very evolved. We're not, right? We're just chimps with iPhones. Yeah. And that's the thing that I spend a huge amount of my time in understanding and looking at how people are engaging with these things, but understanding that the person that's engaging with it at the end of the day is still a chimpanzee.
Yeah, I read an article that you were featured in, and the idea of like, and obviously being an agency owner yourself, it's kind of like when you were talking about, it's, you know, you'll always be successful as a marketer or in marketing because of that. You know, you're not worried about, oh, is Facebook dying, you know, ads going out the window, because it doesn't matter, because you can always evolve. And, you know, much of business and life is not about who's the biggest, who's the strongest, but it's actually the quickest to adapt. And that's probably talks to what you're saying just there, is like, you're always going to be the quickest to adapt because of those principles that you follow and understanding human psychology and basing everything around that, because the variable's not going to change.
Yeah, and then you can just move into these markets and you can just apply all of the learnings that you've spent the tens of thousands of hours in acquiring, and you can use those advantages and you can just get, you know, an unfair advantage because you understand so intimately that prospect and their problems that it doesn't matter if they're on TikTok or Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or Google search or remarketing or whatever, cold emails, normal emails, broadcast campaigns, all of that stuff, that it's still the person and that all of those things are just the delivery vehicle.
Amazing. A quick question before we go into the last section of the podcast. What is it that people don't understand about getting attention that you think stops them?
I think that most people want to play it too safe, and they think that they have a certain idea of how business is conducted in their mind. And they think, this is how I need to look, this is how I need to talk, this is what marketing is meant to look like, right? And they don't think about like that people like, they hate engaging with brands and companies. It's like, what do people do when they open up their inbox in the morning? Check, delete, archive, scroll past ads, skip ads on YouTube. People hate ads, right? And who runs ads? Companies, right? So it's like they think that they need to be a certain way and be buttoned up and professional. It's like, no, that's not what you need to do, right? You need to communicate to people in the way that they communicate every day. And you just want to talk to your customers like you would talk to your best friend. That's what I ultimately believe, right? And I believe that like ultimately it all comes down to solving problems, right? Like I have billion-dollar clients, right? That pay me large sums of money to solve problems for them. And it's like I don't wear suits. I don't do all of those things that conventional people will do because that's not what it, like, yes, that's the way that, you know, businesses should be done. Do they wear suits? Yes, they do. Right? Do I? No, I do not. Right? Because I'm ultimately there to solve a problem. And the same person as I am with them is who I am with you here now. I'm not changing. There's no different lenses or different masks that I'm putting on in all of these different things. And it's just about being someone that is real and authentic and raw. And when you're basically trying to get attention, right? Coming back to the question, it's like, if you understand how chaotic it is out there, Like doing your normal crap is not going to work. Like your normal beige vanilla shit that you put out there, you are dead on arrival if you put that out there. Like you have to be outrageous. You have to be a showman. You have to bring so much to the table to even be able to sit down and get their attention, right? Because all the things that you're competing with are just way more entertaining than your crap. So it better be entertaining, right? You better grab them. And it's like, people are just so afraid of like people unsubscribing for their email or leaving them a negative comment on their Instagram post, on their pretty perfect grid on Instagram, or saying something on LinkedIn. Like, who gives a fuck about those people? Seriously, they're all trolls anyway. Like, you don't worry about offending a few people behind scathing computer screens that are leaving these comments and stuff like that. Like, worry about the people that are enjoying the stuff that you're putting out and the people that you're hurting. And it's like, if I don't get people unsubscribing from my emails or telling me that I've offended them, then I know I've done something wrong.
Yeah.
Because like, you're not there to have everybody like you. That is the quickest way to become invisible.
Caught attention at all costs.
Yeah, you gotta be polarizing, and you've got to do what you've got to do to get attention, because it is a intensely fierce battle out there. And if you're trying to fit in this little box and be safe all the time, then guess what? You're never going to be safe, because you're never going to have enough attention to get enough customers to be in a place that you're going to be safe. So if you're okay with that, if you're okay with like living like a life of hardship because you're not willing to have moments of hardship, then you're not my people.
And you can learn lessons from the people who caught the most attention in life, right? Like
Without a doubt.
The Elons, the Conor McGregors, like
Yeah.
they're just the ultimate, entertainers.
And they know the business that they're in, right? Like, it's like, Elon Musk, it's like he is a phenomenal engineer and like a product guy, right? Like the Tesla's an incredible feat. Like, it's a category king in the EV category. He is obsessed about product, right? Why does he launch a flamethrower and sell 7,000 units and do $3.5 million? Like, he knows the game, right?
Yeah.
Like, he did that to promote his boring company, which by definition he knows is boring, right? So what isn't boring? Flamethrowers aren't boring, right? Selling them and getting the attention. And if you just look at any of the times that Elon gets attention, whether it's smoking weed with Rogan, it's bringing out the flamethrowers, it's buying Twitter, go find the dates of those and then go into Google Trends and look at Tesla's stock price. You will say a direct correlation between attention and money, right? And so it's not just about having the best product. You have to know how to get attention. Did his stock plummet when he went and smoked weed with Rogan? Of course it did. What did it do after that? It rallied like crazy. And you're always going to have people who are watching, it's because of this, and they solve the manufacturing, da-da-da. It's an attention game, right? How many people have the best products in the world that are broke and no one knows about them?
I wonder how manufactured they are as well. Like, we're never going to know, but I wonder how manufactured they are in relation to, say, product launches and different stuff like that, just with Elon.
They're incredibly manufactured. Like, Elon, I would say, is a little bit more of a wild card, but if you look at someone like Kanye, like, you look at all the news headlines that Kanye's in, it's always around album release or like some new Yeezy drop, something like that.
Yeah.
And it's just like, if you look at like the PR company behind the Kardashians, like those dudes are razor sharp. Like, they are media monitoring like crazy. They know the whole thing is a game for attention. And there's no one better at it than them.
Yeah, that's so true. All right, last section is quick fire. So I have to preface this. It doesn't mean that you have to say like 5 words, because there's no real cap on your answer with this, but they're just like, short, broad questions that we ask. The first one is, one piece of advice for your younger self.
Put the work in, it will all be okay, is really what I would say. Like, there's so much, different variables that equate to quote unquote being successful or making it to wherever you're trying to go. And the one that you can control is the amount of effort that you put in. There's so many other things about if your competitors are more well-funded than you, if they've got more money to spend on ads, if their team is bigger. The one thing that you can control is your effort. You can control that and put in freaking level 10 on that, And whatever it is that you want, you'll ultimately end up getting there if you keep iterating.
What's the most important trait that a founder must have and why?
I think you know the answer to this one already. I'm going to say is sales. 100%. If you don't have customers, you don't have a business. And then if you don't have a team, you have a job. And ultimately, whatever you're going to do, you look at, you know, the greatest entrepreneurs of our generation, and they all pretty much either over-index in sales or they have a co-founder that is over-indexed in sales, because as they say, nothing happens until something is sold.
That's the first time we've heard that answer, surprisingly. But I think from listening to yourself talk today and getting a bit of an insight into how you've built what you've built, I love it. Okay, so what's the biggest opportunity for businesses over the next 12 months?
Yeah, I'm the wrong guy to ask that question, because when people ask me, like, what is the hottest new advertising channel? What's the sexiest shit that you guys are working on? I'm like, it's email, right? Email marketing is the best channel. It's still the most profitable. The attention in the inbox is the most valuable attention in the world, because there's not all this other chaotic shit happening around it. So I definitely, like, everyone wants that little dopamine hit. Like, just give me that freaking one thing, right? But ultimately, I would say that, you know, if you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. So just don't play stupid games. And the stupid games are, where are the newest, shiniest objects hiding, and how do I find them as quick as possible? Instead of just focusing on about, like, you know, I would say there's anything that you should focus on the next 12 months that is going to compound like crazy over the course of your life, is understanding people, understanding how to get attention, and then understand how to day trade that attention and persuade that attention to get to the outcome that you want.
That is, I reckon, what you just said, Dan, is a simplified answer to the whole podcast that we just went through.
Yeah.
Mate, we're going to wrap it up. I want to say a massive thank you to you. Obviously, you're super busy, and I appreciate your time. And you've given so much of it, and also given so much value. So, really appreciate your time, mate. Where can people find you? So, Instagram,
TikTok, YouTube,
everything.
Yeah, I will find them.
No, wait. If there's that is the truth, right? So you are in my email, you are on my Instagram, you are everywhere. So I think it kind of talks to everything you've spoken about today.
Awesome, no problems. Thank you so much for having me on. Appreciate it.
Johnny Boy, a big thanks to you for putting this together, and to our listeners. Wow, the last kind of 2 months has been, you know, really amazing, the support that you've shown us. I say this every week, but it's because we're getting more and more support. So for everyone listening, I really hope you're enjoying the conversations, and I appreciate you. Hope you enjoyed the episode, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, we're golden.